All right, what is going on, Laker fans? Thank you very much for tuning in. I appreciate you guys being a part of Hoops Talk here. Got a lot to get into. Of course, last couple of days have been interesting for Laker fans. My apologies on YouTube. Been fighting a little cold here, but I'm back. I'm ready to go, and I got my brother on here, Jovan Buha, covers of course the Lakers and the NBA for the Athletic. Taking some time. Jovan, what's going on, brother? How are you?
I'm hanging in there, man. It's been
Yeah,
a crazy 48 hours,
yeah.
a fun, wild 48 hours, but I'm doing well. It seems like you're doing better.
Yeah, it's funny. We about a minute ago before we started, I was like, "Man, you should have seen me an hour ago. I haven't shaved in forever." And I think we both figured out. You're like, "I can't really get much here." I said, "Well, I can't really get much here." So I think if you merge us
Yeah,
together, we have a lot of facial hair and hair on the top of our heads. So
this is me like 2 days no shaving. You can see the peach fuzz growing.
that's awesome. I go 2 hours. I'm like, you know what? Should I do it again? Should I shave again? Okay, we got a lot to get into. So everybody that's hanging out, thank you for doing so. Please subscribe to the channel. Also go to Jovan's YouTube as well, Buha's Block. He's been killing it, doing a great job. Please subscribe there as well. And I'll put a link in my bio below to kind of give a link to his page as well. So, okay, let's start with this. Here we are as you and I sit here and record. The latest that at least I've read, and you feel free to chime in on this as well. A couple days ago, everybody just assumed, hey, I think this is JJ Redick's job to be had as far as the coaching position. The news comes out, it's like, nope, Lakers are going all in on Dan Hurley. We know they met yesterday, the Lakers and Dan Hurley. I read something this morning that UConn's basically doing everything they can to give another offer to Dan Hurley to try to keep him there. Um, your read, your take of where we sit here today. Do you have any new information based off of what I just set up right there?
Not really. I've seen some reporting that he could potentially be meeting with the Lakers again today. I haven't heard that, but that's, I think, noteworthy if he's meeting with them a couple times and really deliberating about the process. But I go back to Thursday morning, and this story is unlike anything I
Mm,
can really remember because I think we see it with teams where a trade comes out of nowhere. Like I remember the Kawhi PG, double signing slash
that's right.
trading to the
Yep.
Clippers, and it's like you had heard some inklings that Kawhi was had met with the Clippers, and that was the way he was leaning, but all of a sudden there's this bombshell of Paul George or uh, Kevin Durant to the Suns or Kyrie to the Mavericks, and like we can go through Dame to the Bucks. Like we could go through all these blockbuster trades that came out of nowhere, and you might have thought this player was going to one team, and then all of a sudden this other team swoops in, and you hear about that. Same thing with the signings, right? And a guy will sign somewhere where you didn't necessarily expect. You rarely see it with a coaching situation.
Mm,
When it plays out this way, where it's been 5 weeks of the Lakers doing their due diligence, talking to candidates, interviewing candidates, canvassing the league, canvassing clearly college basketball for the guys that they're interested in, and us reporting it at the Athletic, ESPN reporting it, several other outlets reporting it. And at no point was Dan Hurley mentioned
mm.
throughout even as like a passing candidate throughout this process. So then 5 weeks in, all of a sudden, he knocks down the door with a sledgehammer and he becomes the favorite. And in talking to people over the last 48 hours, like there are a lot of theories as to what happened. Personally, I'm highly skeptical he was the favorite for the past 5 weeks. I think what probably happened was some form of he was on the initial list for the Lakers, and there was significant interest in him if he were available or interested. But for whatever reason, at the time, maybe it wasn't the right time, and he wasn't showing interest in this position, and the Lakers moved along in that process, and that's when JJ Redick became the front runner. And I think JJ was always in the mix near the top. I started to hear JJ buzz before they even moved on from Darvin Ham. So I think JJ was in the mix, but then I think JJ became the front runner, and from that point on, that was all the buzz, all the intel for the last few weeks. Lakers had a couple meetings with him, and then all of a sudden, for like, it has not progressed, and it has not gotten to the point of him signing a deal. And I don't know if that's because he's calling the finals or like what has been the holdup. If the Lakers got cold feet, there's a lot of theories with that. And then all of a sudden, Dan Hurley changes his mind, shows interest, and now all of a sudden the Lakers get the guy that they had a strong interest in from the beginning, and now we're in a different place with the coaching search. Because I think if he had really been the guy the entire time and this was like some grand secret plan for 5 weeks, like, it's really hard to keep a secret in the NBA for 5 weeks. It's one thing if it's 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours. Like, that's a long time to keep this type of secret. And he had only had preliminary contact with them as of Thursday before coming in yesterday for a more formal interview process. So it's not like he was having these secret interviews with them over the last 5 weeks. So like, this is really something that materialized this week. And I think, not to go against any reporting or contradict anything, I'm personally highly skeptical. I've spoken with many people who are highly skeptical of like this theory that he's been this secret top candidate the whole time. I think they initially reached out there. It didn't go anywhere for whatever reason, still trying to figure out why. And then he had a change of heart recently. That's what led to him now emerging as the top candidate. So we'll see. The ball's in his court.
Yeah.
The Lakers are prepared to and are making a giant offer at him for different things in terms of how many years, what's the annual value, but it's on him to decide what he wants. And if he wants it, he'll be the Lakers' next head coach.
Okay, a couple things here. First off, I'm with you I was doing the radio show during the week on 710 ESPN, and when the news came out, that was my first initial reaction I'm like, okay, I agree with you that things like this just can't be kept under wrap for that long. It's just, that's not the norm in today's world and today's media. And it doesn't really matter how we got to this point, but I'm with you that was one of the points I was making. I was like, who knows if, okay, yeah, they had initial interest there. Maybe I wouldn't be surprised if it was Dan Hurley and his people saying, let's take another look at this. Like, we want to talk about this again for whatever reason. And maybe the man is using it as leverage against UConn, which I don't personally think that would be the case, but maybe it is. Maybe he just won 2 national championships and realizes the landscape and the timing and can I get the Lakers job right now? And by the way, if it's a long-term deal, then it's not just I'm here for a couple of years. I could be here for 7, 8, 10 years, whatever the case is. I think there's some theories into that as well. The other thing that I would say is the keeping things a secret. I mean, let me use you as an example. Let me use The Athletic as an example. Let me use ESPN as an example. It's not easy to do, right? Like, this is what you guys do. And I love that you said, let me tell you how you kind of started this off saying this is not normal, right? Like the process of getting to this point, I think that says something as well. And I'm not trying to take any credit away from the Lakers or the front office or anything like that, but I lean with you towards the more, maybe this just kind of got going again in the last week and that kind of changed the Lakers. If he was the initial, that would be the absolute target 5 weeks ago. Maybe it kind of, that momentum started changing over the last week or so.
Yeah, and I think a couple things could be true, right? Like, I think because of course, if you look at the candidate list that they've had this entire time, like if we were restarting this process, right, and going back to day one of Lakers just fired Darvin Ham, these are all the candidates they're going to be looking at. I think Dan Hurley would make a lot of sense as the top candidate. Like, I think he checks basically every box that the Lakers have been putting out that they're looking for. They want someone who can set a tone with the culture, build a program, someone who's very organized, structured, disciplined, smart, good with X's and O's, going to hold players accountable. Like, Dan Hurley checks all those boxes. So I have no doubt that like when they started this process, he was at the top of in that top 2, top 3, if not number 1. But there's just a gap there of like, how do you go from firing Darvin Ham and having this guy as your number one guy to no mention of him for the next 5 weeks. And then all of a sudden, 5 weeks later, he pops up as the top guy and all of a sudden you're close. Like, so I think a couple things could be true where it's not binary of like he either was or wasn't their top guy. I think it's more he could have started the process as the top guy, but there was a gap there where they were not talking to him, where he was not in consideration at the level of like hiring. And I think had JJ Redick not been in a position to be calling the finals, he probably just would have been the Lakers coach. Like if JJ was working for TNT and TNT doesn't have the finals, I think JJ Redick is probably the Lakers head coach right now. I think because of that complicating factor with the finals and the timing and the rollout with all that has held things up. And it also allowed the door to not fully close on the situation. Dan Hurley comes in, kicks the door down, and now he's the favorite. So I think like, because there's been, there was the reporting that he's been the favorite the whole time. And like, again, I think maybe he was like the pipe dream favorite. I think maybe he was the behind the scenes. This is the guy we would love to have.
If we can have anybody. Yep.
If we could have anybody, it'd be him. But 2 weeks ago, they were deliberating between JJ Redick and James Borrego. And that's been the center of the search for the last couple of weeks. And that's talk to anybody close to the Lakers. Like that is the intel everybody had. And again, maybe it really was just, Rob Pelinka and a couple other people that had the information of Dan Hurley's our guy. We're going to wait this out. We're going to hope he changes his mind. We're going to drag our feet during this process. And now it's worked out in their favor where he did change his mind. But like, and that's possible. And I think the Lakers do deserve credit for not leaking with this, for holding this in. But again, I think it was such a long time that like, if it was a week or two, I would see that more plausible. But like a 5-week process where you did interview multiple candidates, either formally, informally, in person, over Zoom, whatever it was, like, I don't see, like, he was not a part of that process at that time. So that's where there's like a little bit of a logic break for me with some of this stuff. But look, as to what you just said, it doesn't matter how we got here. We're here now.
Yeah.
And like, as someone in the industry and as someone reporting on the story, it's just been fascinating to kind of try and peel back the layers of like what actually happened, what's the truth, and try to figure that out. But putting all that aside, we're here now. The Lakers are, again, either made an offer or in the process of making an offer. He's likely going to decide by Sunday night. And then we will have some clarity as to he's either the Lakers' next head coach or he's staying at UConn. And if he stays at UConn, things get fascinating because like now you had this situation leak or come out, whatever. And if you're JJ Redick, if you're James Borrego, if you're whoever the Lakers head coach ends up being, I think it would be JJ. If it isn't Dan Hurley, like now you're kind of the second choice. And now you're dealing with some of the fallout that you had to deal with Frank Vogel, where you publicly went after Ty Lue, you went after Monty Williams, and then Frank Vogel in his intro press conference has to answer a question about, how does it feel to be the Lakers' third choice as head coach? And like, that's not a great start. And I think there was always that kind of sentiment of like, how much did the Lakers really want Frank? And then he gets let go after year 3, despite being, winning a championship in year 1. So there's several layers to that with Russell Westbrook and different things. But like, I think it is an interesting kind of fallout here. If like, I think the Lakers were confident that they were going to land Dan Hurley, but until they actually land him, it does leave this potential scenario of like, if you don't get him, now what do you do? And how do you kind of do the damage control and walk this back of like, no, we wanted JJ the whole time. And like, JJ's been our guy. And like, there was a reason the reporting was a certain way. Like JJ was always the front runner. And like, it's just going to be interesting to see kind of how they navigate that.
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. And I'm with you. I thought yesterday in my head, I'm like, okay, wait, let me get this straight here. This guy is flying all the way out to Los Angeles, him and his wife. And I don't think it didn't seem like this is something that you do of, well, let's just get to know each other and then let's see what happens from there. It felt, and again, we'll see what happens. Hey, this is our guy. If you got that far and he was flying to Los Angeles, I was just expecting from this point, all right, the terms are going to be the terms. I don't think the Lakers are going to stop and say, you know what, he wanted $1 million extra a year. We just, we backed off right there, whatever it is. I don't feel like that would be not only wouldn't be a wise decision, but I think there's also a little bit of pressure, like you just mentioned. I think that's fascinating of saying, wait a minute, you're most likely not going to nickel and dime Dan Hurley at this stage. UConn's going to say, well, let's make him an offer. I mean, maybe if there is a chance, maybe there's a little bit of doubt that he has potentially being with the Lakers for whatever reason. So they're going to take their chances. But this is just I know you don't have the answer. I know I don't have the answer on this. At this point, the way everything's been laid out as we sit here Saturday in the afternoon, do you feel like we're far along the process that it would be a surprise to you if Dan Hurley's not the next head coach of the Lakers?
It would be a slight surprise. Like I think if we're looking at a pie chart or a decision tree of like what's the most likely scenario, I think of all the scenarios, like right now, the most likely is just they agree to terms over the next 24 hours. I think it's going to be a gargantuan figure. I think it's going to be at least 5 years, if not maybe 6. Or I've seen Anthony Irwin had the report of 8 years, 100 million. That's a giant number.
Yeah.
But I've heard at least 5 years on a minimum side, but probably even more, somewhere in that 11 to 13 million dollar range annually. So like it's going to be a giant contract, and that type of money really only like it's the Spoelstras, it's the Kerrs, it's the Ty Lues, it's the Popoviches. Monty Williams was an exception that kind of reset the coaching market. But if you look at the guys in that range, like that's more than Mike Budenholzer's making. I believe he's making about $10 million annually. So like Dan Hurley would be coming in as I think that would be the biggest contract for a new head coach period in the NBA and probably in basketball. But I mean, I guess he's not a new head coach, but like you know, in the NBA,
first time in the NBA,
first time NBA head coach. That is a record breaking contract, and it would automatically put him in a certain class of like again, Lou, Kerr, Spoelstra, Popovich. Like he's in that top tier from a financial perspective, and as a head coach, like really that's the way a franchise can show you how they value you is paying you a lot of money and giving you a long deal. And if he gets a 5 to 8 year deal, he's basically untouchable. Like, I mean, we saw with Frank Vogel, you could get fired after year one in Phoenix, right? But for the most part, like if Lakers are committing to Dan Hurley, prying him away from UConn, this is going to be a at least half decade partnership. And like, I do not see them firing him after like year 3 on like an 8 year deal, right? Like that just would be an astronomical amount of money to commit to a guy to then like pull the plug on it. So if they're committing to him for the long haul, and they're going to ride this out. And that would be, so I guess from his perspective, like if the Lakers are willing to offer again, some type of, 6 year deal, 8 year deal, whatever it ends up being, and it's in that 11 to $13 million range, like that's just a lot of money, a lot of years. And that's, I think, a show from the Lakers that like we want you. We
here are the keys
to you.
This is the keys. Yeah.
And there's been talk about him having say in the roster building, which I think is important for whether it's him, whether it's JJ, whoever it is. Like I think the coach needs a level of having some say in the roster building. Which look, Darvin Ham also had some, but I think it's really about being on the same page with Rob Pelinka and the front office in terms of this is the vision for the team. This is the vision for the roster. This is how we want to build it out. And I think last year, like we looking at it, there was a big talking point about continuity and building on the Western Conference Finals run. And the way that the rotation played out, the way that the lineups played out, didn't reflect that. And there was a bit of a dissonance there in terms of, well, if we're talking about continuity, why isn't Rui Hachimura playing more? Why isn't Jared Vanderbilt playing more? Why isn't one of those guys starting? Why aren't the lineups that got us to the conference finals playing more together? Why aren't those combinations playing more together? So I think that was a big disagreement or difference throughout the year last year. And I think having a coach come in, helping build the roster and being on the same page and having a clear vision is really important for the Lakers for the next couple years of the LeBron AD era, but also moving forward.
Fascinating. That's interesting. It's a great way of laying it out as well. And I'm with you. I think we both feel the same way that at this point, you're just expecting that Dan Hurley becomes the next coach. But if you'd asked me on Wednesday, I'd have told you, well, guys, it's JJ Redick. What the hell are we wasting time for? But I know this is obviously a big time curveball. Jovan, I get your opinion from there is obviously some risk by going out there and bringing in a head coach. And I don't have any question that Dan Hurley doesn't know what he's doing. I don't have any question that he's a phenomenal basketball coach. But there is a difference from going to college to the NBA. And there is a track record of college coaches coming into the NBA and not having this unbelievable success. And there's also some coaches that have been able to do it on both sides, and they've been successful. But I guess my question to you is that long term of a contract, if he does come, that here are the keys to the franchise, and not just any franchise, the Los Angeles Lakers franchise. The kind of interesting transition that the Lakers are in. What they look like today is going to be a lot different in a couple of years. It just will. And that's me assuming that LeBron James decides to stop playing at some point. And, as phenomenal and unbelievable as he's been, but at some point that's going to end. Theoretically, that's supposed to, I guess, come to an end at some point. Can you talk about what you think are some of the things that makes you excited if he does become the head coach, and some of the things that you're also that just naturally there are some concerns? There's no guarantees in life. There's no guarantees that this is going to work perfectly. Just if you can lay out both sides of that.
Yeah, well, so I will be the first to admit I don't follow college basketball closely. So I'm not, I knew who Dan Hurley was, but I was not, I couldn't tell you a lot about his schematics or his philosophies or whatnot. So I have spent a lot of the past 48 hours talking to people, picking their brains on what do you think of him? How do you see him adjusting? How do you see him transitioning? I've been reading stuff. I've been watching stuff. So I've been trying to educate myself on him and learn as much as I can. So it does seem like he runs an NBA, like a high level, intricate NBA type offense with a lot of off ball movement, a lot of, proper spacing. He's figured out different creative ways to hide his sets and kind of you run these decoy actions and finding ways to, use guys who aren't shooters, non-shooters, and leverage that against defenses. So I think coming in, he's going to find creative ways to use Anthony Davis, use Jared Vanderbilt, and unlock some things for the Lakers offense. So I think from an offensive perspective, he's arguably the best college basketball coach right now, period, in terms of offense and that ability to translate that to the NBA level. So I think from a tactical perspective, the Lakers would be in great hands with him. And then defensively, he's shown a level of versatility. If you look at his pick and roll coverages with his big men, he will adapt his pick and roll coverages to the big man and what their strengths are, and not run, I'm just going to do drop coverage, or I'm just going to do switching, or I'm just going to do blitzing. It's what does, what are the skill sets of my big man? What are the skill sets of the guys in the action? And I will adjust that based on their strengths and the best way to defend that. So I think he's shown both a level of tactical genius and a level of adaptability that I think are both very important traits at the next level. You also see he's got that fiery, hands-on personality. I also think that could be a potential con, which I will touch on in a second. But if you look at some of the top coaches, be it a Spoelstra, Kerr, a Michael Malone, to keep him happy, those guys are very hands-on, and I think that was something that Laker fans had some frustrations with the previous regime in terms of hands in the pockets and not calling timeouts and not being as hands-on in terms of game management. And clearly Hurley's one of the if not the most, he's animated on the sidelines, he's fiery, he's yelling at the crowd, he's yelling at refs, he's yelling at his players, like he's into it, and you could tell he's obsessed with it, he's passionate, he just has this love that is very intense for the game, and he's just maniacal. And those are, I think, some of the traits that the Lakers liked about JJ Redick and still like about him, but also clearly some traits that they like about Dan Hurley. So I think those are all positives. I think to your point, like the cons are there's the clip that's been going viral of, fill in my huddle. Like you're not going to be yelling that in a Lakers huddle. And if you are, the players are going to be tuning you out very quickly. And I think one of the things I look at is Frank Vogel and Darvin Ham both lost the locker room to varying extents and in varying degrees, depending on who you talk to. But this has been a difficult locker room to command for various reasons over the last few years, and difficult to maintain buy-in. And I think coming in as a hotshot college coach with, I'm sure on some level, a bit of an ego, and deservedly so, like coming in, like you got to kind of humble yourself and check your ego at the door a little bit and figure out a way to connect with these guys and maintain buy-in. And it's just, there is, like, basketball is basketball, whether you're playing it at the NBA level, the college level, high school level, youth level, basketball is basketball. But in terms of relating to people and getting buy-in, it's deeper than how smart are you as an X's and O's coach. It's deeper than, oh, I just won back-to-back college championships. It's about, can you connect with these guys? Can you figure out ways to talk to different guys differently? Can you, I mean, he's just gonna have to approach it. It's almost a 180 in terms of, like, you cannot talk to NBA players the same way you talk to college players. They will just not have it. And I think the Lakers could use a stronger voice and a bit of a tougher hand. And I think those are positives for Hurley. But if he's going to come in and think it's his show and he's running, and I don't think he will, to be clear, but like it is, I think it's different to say that in like an interview and then to actually apply it. And I think he's got to find that balance of, like, how can I be tough on these guys? How can I make sure I'm clearly the leader and I'm the one in charge, while also not alienating a lot? Like, because LeBron's always going to have a measure of power on any team, and AD is at the level where he should have a measure of power. So, like, how do I connect with these two guys? How do I get their buy-in? How do I allow them to have power that I wouldn't give, you know, college players, even my stars? And then also, when I'm talking to role players, when I'm developing guys, like, how do I find that I'm going to give you tough love, I'm going to do, but like also not overstep a boundary and talk to you like you're an 18-year-old. So I think that's probably the biggest learning curve. And to be clear, like, I think Hurley will figure it out. I think based on the interviews I've seen, based on talking to people, like, it seems like he's aware of that. It seems like he has a really good disposition and mentality with all this stuff. So I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying, if we're looking at how this could potentially go wrong, it's he comes in with a big ego. I'm this two-time, champion, or back-to-back champion, and I know everything, and you guys need to, like, I got the 8 years, I got the 6 years, whatever it is. Like, you guys need to adapt to me. And if he comes in with that attitude, I don't think it's going to work out. But I don't think he will. I'm just kind of laying out, like, I guess, the potential con here.
Well, I think there's two sides to that. I think there's the portion, like you mentioned, I'm a two-time national champion. And then also, look, one of the most popular franchises in sports, all of sports, just said, here's the keys. You're not going anywhere, right? That I think what you mentioned at the beginning as well. And I'm with you. I don't think he's dumb enough to treat NBA players like college players, because it's not the same, right? And I think that would be a colossal mistake if his own ego gets in the way. Granted, that's not uncommon in the world of sports and business and everything else. Ego does get in the way. But I think the fact that what you just said too about it's the most popular brand in all of sports, one of the most popular brands. There isn't many of them. It's the Yankees, it's the Cowboys, it's Real Madrid, there's only a few. Lakers are one of them. And here's a franchise that said, it's all yours. And by the way, it will be yours even after LeBron's gone. It will be yours even after potentially, I mean, AD's still young enough. We'll see what happens, but it's going to be yours for a while. I mean, hell, I don't even think this is a stretch to say. If you said, who do you think is going to last longer, Dan Hurley or Rob Pelinka? That's a conversation. It is just that, the president of basketball operations, they're clearly investing so much into Dan Hurley. But I'm with you. I don't think, again, I'm going to say it again. I don't think he's dumb enough to allow that stuff to be the difference where you would want disagreements. You want disagreements just based on what's in the best interest of winning, and if everybody's pulling that rope in the same direction.
Yeah, no, I mean, and again, and to be clear, like I'm not saying I think that's going to be an issue. I just think that is commonly like
Of
the
course.
biggest I think
Yeah.
issue is. I mean, like I think there's been two issues. Like one, college basketball. I know I'm kind of contradicting myself here, but like basketball is basketball to some extent, but like college basketball, obviously, you got a different shot clock. You got different, you got halves and the substitution. Like there are differences there where you do have to adapt to the NBA game. And like there are these subtle things that like I think some coaches just have struggled to adapt to for whatever reason. I don't have any concern with that with him. I think he will, like, he's a basketball genius. I think he's one of the best coaches in America right now, and he's going to figure that part out. I've no doubt about that. I think the second thing is, again, kind of adapting to, like, there are certain college coaches who have come in, which is giant egos of like, I've won a national championship. I've had, X amount of success. I've had all these lottery picks or this and that. And like, I'm going to like, and then they kind of, get the confirmation from the team of like, well, we want to promote you from college basketball to the NBA. And like, and that could be kind of a self-validation thing where that boosts your self-confidence and your ego. So I think that would be like the one. And I think also when we talk about some of these things, it can kind of sound black or white. Like there's shades of gray here where like, even if he has a little bit of the ego and he's just a little bit more tilted to that side, that's where it can start to rub some of the players the wrong way. So I don't think that's going to happen if he does get hired. I think he will adjust well, and I think he'll adjust how he approaches it. I just think if he's continues to approach it in a similar way to college, that's in terms of like how he deals with the players. That's like the one way I could see this going south.
It's interesting because the Lakers have had 6 coaches in the last 13 years. And even if you win an NBA championship like Frank Vogel, your job is on the line. Even if you're Darvin Ham and you got to the Western Conference Finals in your first year, you could lose the locker room and then bam, it's over. Obviously, with Dan Hurley, if Dan Hurley becomes the next coach of the Lakers, there's a long-term play here. I'm curious to get your thoughts on how you think this changes the offseason for the Lakers, if at all. And really what I'm talking about is if he becomes the head coach, what do you think happens short term versus long term? Because what typically a coach like this comes into a situation and you got a lot of young guys, let's say, and he's coming from college and they think, you know what, he's going to grow. It's kind of reminds me a little bit of, and it's not the best example, but when Luke became the coach of the Lakers, Luke Walton became the coach of the Lakers, he had some runway. He had a lot of young players. They didn't have expectations weren't right away. Hey, you got to go make the playoffs. But Lakers got a roster where they're trying to win right now. How do you think this changes, if it changes anything at all, about short-term plan versus long-term plan if he becomes the coach?
Well, so I've been saying for about 2-3 weeks now that I've been hearing more recently that the Lakers are leaning more toward just upgrading the supporting cast rather than going for that third star. I think Donovan Mitchell will likely be the exception. If Donovan Mitchell becomes available and the Lakers have an opportunity to get him, I think he's the one guy that they would push all the chips in and say, if we can get him, he could be our third guy. Because I think one of the things that it's important to remember when we talk about these, I mean, it's getting tricky to build 3-star builds in the new CBA with the first apron, the second apron. There's all these restrictions that come once you hit that first apron. There's all these really punitive restrictions that come when you hit that second apron, including your ability to trade, you draft picks and signing guys. And like, there's all these things that happen with that. So the NBA is really pushing back against, like, if you're going to build a 3-star build, you're basically going to have the Phoenix situation where it's all minimum guys essentially around them. And like, as we've seen, that's you probably don't have a good enough supporting cast, going back to like the first year of the Miami Heat, this last year with Phoenix, and like several other instances where it's like, if you don't have at least 2 to 4 quality high level role players around even your stars, you're probably not going to win a championship or go far in the playoffs. Now, the distinction I'll make though is if you look at the Phoenix Suns, if we're ranking guys, like Bradley Beal is like maybe a top 50 player. I think he's somewhere in that like 40 to 60 range if we were actually ranking guys. And Donovan Mitchell is clearly a top 20 player. So
Sure.
like, Donovan Mitchell is at a level where I think if you can get Donovan Mitchell, I think
27 years old. Yep.
strongly consider that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Donovan Mitchell aside, I think the plan right now is going to be upgrading the supporting cast, leveraging that they have 3 tradable picks, 2024, 2029, 2031. And can you package a rotation player or two with a pick or two? And can you bring in a better player? Maybe you could do a couple of trades where you trade out a couple guys and you attach some picks and you bring in better players that better fit. I thought what an interesting part of the reporting from ESPN on Thursday was specifically Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, and Max Christie were the 3 guys mentioned as being part of this program that the Lakers are trying to build out with Dan Hurley. So Austin Reeves under contract. And as I've reported many times, the Lakers do not want to trade Austin Reeves. They've kept him out of talks with Kyrie Irving. They've kept him out of talks with DeJounte Murray. And really, I've heard the one exception to potentially trading Austin Reeves would be like a high-level all-star. I think Donovan Mitchell would be one of those exceptions. But like Donovan Mitchell aside, the Lakers really want to keep Austin Reeves, and like they view him as a long-term piece, and that's why they signed him to the 4-year deal. So Austin Reeves, we know like they want to keep him as a cornerstone. Rui Hachimura has been someone that if we are playing the trade machine game, like Rui almost has to be in a lot of these trades just for salary matching purposes, unless D'Angelo Russell is opting in, and then you could use D'Lo as like the centerpiece. So I thought it was interesting that they mentioned Rui as like, that indicates to me they might not trade Rui. They might not want to trade Rui. And I know they don't want to, but like if you have to get an upgrade, like
price of doing business. Yeah.
You got to trade someone, right? So, and then Max Christie is a restricted free agent. And the way restricted free agency has worked recently is more often than not, teams just don't even touch restricted free agents. They're not going to offer because you're going to tie your cap sheet up. And then most likely the team is just going to match it just to retain the asset. So that also shows that, and as I reported this about a month ago, like Lakers want to keep Max Christie. That confirms that. And it looks like Max Christie is going to be resigned. Now, there was no mention of D'Angelo Russell. There was no mention of Jared Vanderbilt. There's no mention of Gabe Vincent. Those guys are, D'Lo and Gabe are in their late 20s. So they're not necessarily on like the younger timeline. But regardless, like I just thought it was interesting, like the names that were mentioned versus the names that weren't. And that could be a little bit of a sign of like D'Lo, Vando, Gabe. Maybe those are the guys that are available if the Lakers are looking to make some of these moves. But in terms of short-term, long-term planning, I think one thing that the new CBA is encouraging is like you have to be able to develop your younger talent.
Sure.
And find a way like that kind of makes drafting even more important. And fortunately for the Lakers, they have a really good track record with the draft. Obviously, the JHS pick is not looking great so far, but he's still, he's a year into his career. Like I think it's too early to write him off. If we're having the same conversation next year at this time, maybe it's time to start writing him off. But if he shows some level of progress, like I think we got to give him the benefit of the doubt for now. Then you got Maxwell Lewis, you got obviously Christie, Reeves, Hachimura, maybe Jackson Hayes stays. Cam Reddish, I think, will likely opt in and be on the team next year. So they have this stable of young players, young talent, all guys like 27 and under. And it's how do you develop those guys? How do you grow those guys? And I think looking at a guy like Dan Hurley, he's had a lot of success with that, of having guys continue to progress throughout his program and skill development, player development. So I think a coach who can, and I think my best example of this is like looking at how the Lakers handled Max Christie versus how a team like Denver handled Christian Brown. Like Christian Brown, the Nuggets decided Christian Brown is going to be a rotation player. He's going to be our Bruce Brown. We're going to empower him. And there's going to be growing pains. There's going to be games he goes 1 for 6 and looks like a second year guy. And we're going to live with it because we're developing and growing Christian Brown to be a playoff player and to be a long-term piece for us. And I thought Christian Brown had a really good playoffs. Like the Denver bench was shaky, not because of Christian Brown. I thought he was really good on both sides of the ball. And then you look at how the Lakers handle Max Christie, and it's like, well, he's sometimes in the rotation. He's not in the rotation. He has a bad shooting night. He doesn't play for 3 games. I thought like that Knicks game, he had a really good game. To me, from that point on, I was like, Max Christie deserves to be in the rotation. He closed that game really guarding DiVincenzo, guarding Brunson. And then he basically, from that point in the season, like somehow was out of the rotation for the most part from then on. So like, just some of the way he was handled didn't really make sense to me. And I think like if you bring in a Hurley, he's going to groom that guy. He's going to develop that guy and he's going to empower him. So I think from a short-term perspective, I think the Lakers are looking more at upgrading the supporting cast, but longer term, it's going to be about, we're going to find these gems that we found for the last decade plus, and now we're going to empower Hurley to develop them and bring out all their skills. So I think having a player development type coach, and that's not to say that's all he can do, but having a guy who knows how to develop players is really valuable. And that to me is a shift in like what you look for in a coach in a winning situation. And that is I think something that's really attractive about Hurley.
Makes me think of, even with Dallas, Jaden Hardy, right?
Yeah.
There's a player that I'm kind of just discovering him in the playoffs. I'm like, what? This guy's getting opportunities in the postseason in big time situations, and Jason Kidd's giving him those chances. It reminds me of, I'm going to give a baseball equivalent here. Just a reminder here, I'm a Padres fan, not a Dodger fan, but I'm going to give a Dodger fan or I'm going to give a Dodger example. The Lakers have all the resources. The Lakers have the ability to go get stars in a different way that some of these other markets just can't do it. The Lakers have an attractive brand, and the Dodgers do as well. But the Dodgers also have always one of the best farm systems in baseball. So it's like, wait a minute. No, how can you have the combination of the two? You have all the resources. You can go out and get star players, but you also are developing and cropping your own players. And I think that's what separates the Dodgers from a lot of other teams in baseball. And I just bring that in as an example because I think with the Lakers, like you said, that, you know what? No, they do have a pretty good track record of drafting certain players. But can you now have a coach that is, you almost take these first couple of years, the first 3-4 years as an NBA player? My God, look how much better this guy is from his rookie season to his second year, from his second year to his third year. That becomes valuable. And I love what you said about in today's NBA. The NBA is trying to reward, the Thunder is a great example. They're trying to reward, identify players and crop them. And, obviously the Oklahoma City Thunder is a good example of it. There's other NBA teams that are doing it as well. But if you can have a franchise as powerful as the Lakers also cropping their own players, that's a good sign there. And maybe Dan Hurley is the perfect person to do that. I want to ask you a quick question here because you mentioned D'Angelo Russell. I'm curious. It seems like, and this has been, unfortunately for D'Angelo Russell, this has been his entire career. Wherever he goes, it's like, well, he's going to be a piece used at the trade deadline. He's never really found a home where somebody says, that's our guy. What do you think for your interaction with D'Angelo Russell, the way the last couple of years have ended with the Lakers? What do you think he wants? Do you think he would prefer being a Los Angeles Laker, or do you think he's hoping this offseason, I really hope there's a team out there, the San Antonio Spurs, the Orlando Magic, a team that has some cap space to come in and say, you're our guy, you're our point guard, and we're going to give you a contract that you feel is fair as well?
I think D'Lo wants to be wanted. And I go back to him being traded to the Lakers the second time, or I guess the first time being traded to the Lakers, but second stint with the Lakers rather. And one of the big talking points around that time and really through the rest of the season, as we started to talk to him about his upcoming free agency and what he wanted to do, was he just kept referencing like, I just want a home. I want a home in the NBA. I want to feel wanted. I don't want to feel like I'm being shopped or being traded. And obviously he signs, struggle, like I think has an up and down playoffs and really struggles in that Denver series, and that compromises some of his value. He ends up signing a 2-year deal, which is really a 1+1, where he has the player option on year 2. And now he's kind of in a similar situation where he can opt in, but then he is going to be a free agent the following year. And now the second, if he opts in, the second he opts in, the Lakers can trade him. There's no restrictions on that. So if right now, today, D'Angelo Russell opted in, he could be traded 30 seconds later. So like that's a consideration for him as well, is like, if he chooses to opt in, he's all of a sudden a tradable contract, expiring contract, $18.7 million. That's likely going to be one of the matching salaries in any trade. If the Lakers are making any mid-size to big trade, they're going to need either D'Lo or Rui, most likely, to make the math work. So he immediately becomes trade bait if he opts in. I think, and you talk to different people around the league, and you hear different things, that there's a lot of mixed intel in terms of like what D'Lo wants. The one thing I've been saying for weeks now has been the Orlando Magic are the team that you continue to hear as the most likely suitor for him. Makes a lot of sense. They're going to have over $60 million in cap space. And I don't think he's their first option. I think they're going to go after Paul George. They're going to go after Klay Thompson. They're going to go after Malik Monk. So he's probably like their fourth or fifth option, but there's a good chance that, Klay Thompson either stays in Golden State or maybe he goes elsewhere. There's going to be a lot of interest in him. Paul George, the Sixers are going to be interested in him. Obviously the Clippers are going to try and keep him. So like if they strike out on option 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe D'Angelo Russell ends up going to Orlando, or even so, you could afford like one of those guys plus D'Angelo Russell. So, I think that's the one team that's been out there. San Antonio, I've also heard, but I don't know how much I buy that. I feel like they're probably going to try and do a bigger swing. So I think coming down to it, like I think he would love a multi-year deal that would give him some measure of security, because if the Lakers, if he opts out and re-signs with the Lakers, even if it's at a lower figure, he at least now can't be traded, depending on the number, depending on the contract, until at least December 15th. So he's going to be a Laker for the next, I guess if we're saying July 1st, the next 5+ months, he will be a Laker. He will start the season as a Laker. He will be a Laker for at least the first couple months of the season. Then now he could get shopped again and could get traded, but he's under contract for at least multiple years. If he signs with a new team, similar thing, can't be traded until December 15th. But also theoretically, if a new team is courting him and signing him to a multi-year deal, it's to keep him. It's to make him one of their featured guys. And it's a team showing that, hey, we're interested in you. We want you to be a part of our core. We want you to be a prominent piece of this franchise. So like, I think if he had his pick, it would be a multi-year deal where he feels like he is a part of something. He feels like he's wanted and valued, and he has a home that he can just say, like, this is my team for the next X amount of years, and I'm making X amount of money. But I don't know if it's going to be that simple, because again, like, part of the next few weeks is canvassing the league, seeing which guy's going to go where, which teams are going to have cap space, which teams are going to be using their cap space in what manner. And then if it's like Orlando and San Antonio, you'll kind of have an idea of like what they're doing. And then once you have that, it's sort of, he has to make the choice of like, do I opt in, get that money that is guaranteed for another year, but maybe I'm trade bait, or do I opt out and take that chance of trying to find a home for longer term? So I think if I had to pick which way I think it goes, it's probably more toward opting out and trying to get a multi-year deal. But if there's no market, then I think if he opts in, it's clear there's no market. Like that's just what it comes down to.
Yeah, he's fascinating. And I, what you said in the beginning there of he just wants to feel wanted. I don't think that's LA. I don't, but it might just be in his best interest from a business perspective. And I guess it's just another business transaction for D'Angelo Russell. So whatever happens there happens. But I was curious to get your thoughts, less of what the Lakers would do, more of what he wants. Okay, final one. And I appreciate you, of course, Jovan, taking some time here on this Saturday. NBA Finals. Game 1 wasn't very entertaining at all. I'm curious to get your thoughts between Boston and Dallas. Was game 1 just, hey, Dallas, it's a feel-out game for them, and this is not that much different than the way it's gone so far for Luka and Jason Kidd, where they struggle in game 1, even though they won game 1 against the Minnesota Timberwolves? Or are the Boston Celtics just that much better, and when the dust settles, Boston will be raising up banner number 18?
I lean more toward the latter, and I know Laker fans don't want to hear that.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that.
I just look at, like, I mean, it's been there all season where, I'm a stats guy, an analytics guy, and like and this is a basic stat, so it's not anything crazy, but like, point differential, net rate, point differential is just how much, margin of victory, average margin of victory. And then net rating is your, basically point differential over 100 possessions. So it's standardized, so you can kind of compare it because teams play different number of possessions. Also, year over year, you're kind of standardizing it to compare it. And Boston has been an all-time team. Like this is not like they're in the conversation with like 1996 Chicago Bulls, 2017 Golden State Warriors, and it's kind of weird because we don't think of. I think most people don't think of them that way.
Sure.
And you look at the Bulls had Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman, and like those Warriors had 4 All-Stars, including 2 guys who I think a lot of people would put in their top 15.
And look at the coaches:
top
Phil Jackson, Steve Kerr.
Yep, the coaches. So you have this Boston team who, like, I think most people like Jason Tatum is debatably a top 5 player. I probably have him like 6th or 7th. So they don't even have a top 5 guy. Their coach was kind of got a lot of flack last year, and I think there's still some mixed opinions about how good of a coach Joe Mazzulla is. But that top 6 is incredible, and one of the things with that top 6 that I think we've really seen over the course of this season and over the course of this playoff run is all 6 guys are two-way players, and that's what makes this Boston thing so good. Is like they were top 3 on both sides of the ball this year. And they've been top 3 on both sides of the ball in the playoffs. And it's because that starting group, even without Porzingis, is like all 5 guys are pluses on both sides of the ball. And it's hard to find, it's hard to create a lineup, period, let alone a starting lineup and a lineup you can play for as much as they play that has guys that are good on both sides of the ball. Typically, you'll have one guy who can't shoot, or you'll have one guy who's kind of a minus defensively. That's not the Celtics. Like those guys all can defend, all can switch. We saw the impact Porzingis made, and then all 5 guys, and then 6 if you include Horford, can shoot and shoot at a high level, and are close to 40% high volume 3-point shooters. So just having a top 6 like that is so rare in the modern NBA. But to me, I just mentioned him. I look at Porzingis as like we didn't know what to expect with Porzingis. It looked like he was going to be back, but you don't know when a guy comes off missing 10 games, missing multiple weeks, what they're going to look like, especially on the final stage.
He look great.
And if he looks like that, like no one's beating them, right? Like it might be a sweep. If Porzingis plays like that the next 3 games, it's probably a sweep or maybe a 5-game series. Now, does he get injured? Does it get flared up again? Does he start to struggle? Like, does Dallas make certain count? Like, so I think there's still a lot of series left, obviously, but if Porzingis is going to play like that, and look like that, like I don't see how Dallas wins more than like a game.
Hope you're wrong. I hope I'm wrong too, because I'm with you on that, and I know Laker fans are, but I'm with you. I think it's one thing to be a fan, it's another thing to be real, and I got a difficult time trying to figure out how Dallas is going to take 4 against the Boston Celtics. Jovan, great stuff, brother. Thank you for the insight. Thank you for hopping on. Really fun conversation. I appreciate you hanging out. For all those that have been here almost an hour on the show, thank you for doing so. Again, please subscribe to the channel right here on Hoops Talk. Buha's block, I'm going to put the description below. You'll get a chance to subscribe there as well. And we'll do this again soon, man. Thank you for the time, brother. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. I got to have you on my show. We got to
I'm ready.
Tables.
I'm ready when you are. Okay, buddy?
Let's do it.
All right, Laker fans, thank you very much. Hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend.